probably the most defining moment of my footballing career. And when I look at the work that I do now, I know that I have the platform to give a voice to those that don't have a voice.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Players Lounge on Football Business Television, where the game gets down to business. And today we are joined by a very fascinating person, I would say, fascinating, amazing ex-football player, Paul Stewart. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm fine, thank you, Seb. Yeah, very good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
You can see a little bit of a bit of sunshine. This is not the UK sunshine. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Mallorca at the moment, Seb. Yeah, just taking a few days break to rest because I've got a lot of work when I go back to the UK.
Okay. You know, from a foreigner perspective, I'm almost British because I've been there for 17 years and I've made my due diligence. And when I came into the country, especially to a certain club, you got to know about the history of the club. You got to know about the people that have impacted the club. And I got to say, you had a fascinating career. You grew up in Manchester, but you played for my club, one of my club, Tottenham Hotspurs. But I want to take you back to memory lane. What when you grew up in Manchester, what was your earliest memory about football? Yeah, and your ambition. What was that?
Well, to be honest with you, ever since I could walk, Seb, my only dream was to become a footballer. I was brought up on a council estate in Manchester in Wythenshawe, and all you had was football really. And as you know, when you come from Manchester, there are two sides of the city. There's red and there's blue, and you grow up supporting one of them. I grew up as a United fan. My older brother used to take me to the games when we could actually sneak in the ground without paying because we didn't have the money, and from the smell, from the atmosphere, I just knew that that was what I wanted to do. So I guess going to watch Manchester United when I was such a young boy with my older brother. Um, I just always dreamt of emulating, if possible, and joining them stars that were on that pitch.
But is it not? You've played for a red team, but Manchester United wasn't the one.
No, yeah, don't remind anyone of that, please, Seb. I need to go back to Manchester to visit my brother. So
Yeah, but no, but you represented different clubs and at the highest level. You played for England. You had a very, for me, successful career. What stands out the most about your career when you look back about every club that you played and the players that you play with? I mean, tell me a little bit about, yeah, for you, what stands out the most?
I guess when I look back of it, of my career, Seb, I would have, I'd hoped that I'd enjoyed it more than I did. Um, I was what I think a typical player that just, we didn't realise the privilege that was bestowed upon us when we became professional footballers, and you take for granted, I think, sometimes the actual privileged position that you're in. Um, I struggled with my mental health when I played, which didn't afford me to enjoy it as much as my colleagues. But then, there were good times in there when I played with some of, I think, the best players of my era. I was one of those lucky individuals to play in midfield with Paul Gascoigne. I then played up front with Gary Lineker. I had my striking partner when I joined at Liverpool was Ian Rush. So, when I look back at some of the players of my era that I actually played on the pitch with, then I just I have the regret that I didn't take it in, I didn't embrace it, I didn't appreciate it as much as I really should have.
Uh, although you say that you didn't appreciate it as much as you should have, you scored a very, very special goal for Spurs, in the FA Cup final in 1991. I mean, take us back a little bit, for because
Yeah,
listen, the reason why I'm asking you that question
yeah,
is because I scored the first ever Champions League goal for Spurs. So you
yeah.
scored that one. So let's talk a little bit about scoring that a goal. That was
Yeah, I mean that season, Seb. Our league form wasn't the best. I think Paul Gascoigne was the bright light in everything. But during the FA Cup run, I played at my first club in the first round, Blackpool. It was a horrible day. It was raining, it was windy, a typical Blackpool day in February, I think, or January. And we came away, I scored a goal, and we came away with a lucky win. And then Paul Gascoigne, I think I can honestly say, probably single handedly took us all the way to the semi finals and to the final with that incredible goal. Um, but in the final, Paul, which was it was I guess matched up as the Clough Gascoigne final. Brian Clough had never won the FA Cup. Paul Gascoigne was playing his last game for Spurs before going to Lazio, so it was matched up with them two in the press build up. Um, Paul, as we know, made a rash challenge early on, and that ended his cup final. And I just remember thinking, Seb, that what all that I'd been throughout my life came to this defining moment. Stuart Pearce put Forest 1-0 up. They'd always been our bogey team. You know, when we played them in other comps, they always seemed to get a narrow victory over us. So that was playing on everyone's mind, I think. And I just remember thinking when Paul went off, because I could see my teammates' shoulders drop as if to say, "Oh, we've lost our best player. We've gone 1-0 down," and almost considering throwing the towel in. And I just remember thinking, I've come through a lot. I've come a long way to have this special day. I'm not going to allow the fact that Paul's gone off injured to spoil that. And I thought I'm going to do everything I can within my power to get us back on track. And the goal that we scored, the equaliser, which I scored, was probably one of the most defining moments in my life. Um, I remember Gary Lineker chasing me down as I jumped over the hoardings, thanking me for the goal because he'd missed a penalty, and he himself he wanted to win a title. And just remember him grabbing the hold of the back of me, saying thank you, thank you, thank you. But I think from that point onwards, we then grew in strength and stature, and we were going to go on and win it. I know it was a Des Walker own goal, but I think when we got the equaliser, I think we'd taken everything away from Forest. So I can't say it wasn't a special day because I had my family in the stands watching the game. And do you know back then as well, Seb, the FA Cup was a trophy that was coveted. As a young boy growing up, you wanted to play in a cup final. That was even more sometimes than winning the league because it was on TV all day. The cameras were there, and it was a special moment. And one I won't forget. I won't forget. But yeah, it was probably the most defining moment of my footballing career.
to be fair, when I joined England, I don't know, there was something special about the FA Cup. And
Mm.
people were telling me, talking about the FA Cup in such a way that, and I embraced it. So that's why I totally relate. I can relate about, the special smell, the special sense of the FA Cup. But you touched on mental health and that game, the fact that you could, after everything that happened to you, you had to make an impact. And for me, that almost sums it all up about your career, about what you do. The word impact, because whatever you've been through, and publicly spoken about it, and we're going to touch on it. But don't you think that everything happened. Not everything happened for a reason. No, that's not what I'm saying. Don't. But the role that you played, even in that cup final, is almost what you've been doing after football. You know what I'm saying? Means that impacting. You had to get people out of trouble after everything that you've been through. You almost felt like a mission. You were on a mission. So can you obviously talk publicly
Yeah, I
about
think
what
I
happened?
understand. Yeah, I understand totally what you're saying, and I think that was part of what what happened to me as a child. That became part of my makeup, if you will. Um, I had to, and was always in having to survive mode, having to take care of people at such a young age when I shouldn't, have to deal with things at such a young age when you shouldn't have to, and what that gives you is a mental, I think, resilience, Seb, to be able to face adversity and look it in the face and somehow, and I said that's why I say somehow, find a way to survive that, find a way to get through it, because if you don't, the implications are and can be devastating to what people that have been through the same as me end up doing to themselves because they can't find a way to survive. And I think within me was that determination to conquer and survive, even though it had a big impact on my life.
I always think that there's some people, special people that have a vision, and other people need a visionary person to lead them towards, or to help them to go through some, some sort of trauma, some sort of situation where they couldn't they wouldn't be able to get out of it by themselves. As you said, what happened to how did that impact what you're doing now after football? How did that shape, your mission, your purpose into the business that you've done after football?
I think Seb I never intended when I finished football, and you know what it was like for us once the game comes to an end, you're not really prepared for it. I wasn't. There was nothing in the game, nobody in the game. There were no sort of facilities to help you with that crossover from playing football where we live in a bubble, where everything's done for us, to going out into the real world and actually understanding that football is a different scenario, and I didn't really expect to be telling my story. And I always say I'd managed to survive again that exit from football, the issues that you have when the football's no longer there, and then move on, and thought that my life was then going to be just run out in as normal as possible. And then that day in 2016 when I decided to speak just changed everything. And when I look at the work that I do now, I know that I have the platform to give a voice to those that don't have a voice, and that's really, I guess, what drives me on, because you know the fact that I did play for England and play for Spurs and Man City, Liverpool, then I can somehow be able to speak where others and people won't listen if they haven't done that. I'm not saying that that should be the case, but you and I know it is the case, and I think
No,
I'm
there's
I'm I'm
credibility
moral.
involved.
Yeah, I think morally, I have responsibility to do that, and that's what inspires me to keep on doing the work that I'm doing. Um, I have again, within football, I'm sort of touching back into the game, but have the opportunity to help the children that are trying to make the way through. Um, with my experience, help them. along the way, and be careful of the potholes that they will no doubt encounter while they're trying to make their way in the game. You know, Seb, it's not easy to make your way in the game of football, and now it's even more difficult than it was when certainly when I started in the mid 70s. So I just hope that with my experience with what happened to me, but also, I'd like to think that the most important thing is that I encourage them to speak up if they've got any issues whatsoever. And I don't care how big or how small they are. I'd love to have gone out on that football pitch with one thing on my mind, Seb: the game, my job, and nothing else. But I took so much onto the pitch and to training, Seb.
Listen, I can understand. I remember sometimes going onto the pitch with I mean, football was my exit because I had so much in my head. I wanted to escape. I don't drink, so for some football was my escape. I
Yeah.
was going on the pitch. I didn't want to leave the pitch because the problem that I had in my head, and people don't realize that's what I love the safeguarding what you do, the mental health, because I work in the same industry myself. Because when you do when you do speak, it's half of the cure already done. People don't realize the heavy lifting that is within speaking. And for me, I wanted you being very much into it. How do you assess nowadays, mental health, safeguarding regarding the youngsters? How do you assess the whole industry?
I think we've come on massive strides, Seb. And you said something then that I relate to. For me, as a child, when I was going through what I was going through, that football was the escape. It was the only place I felt safe. So when I was on that football pitch, I realised no one could hurt me. No one could do anything to me. So I relate to it being an escape. I think that we need to recognise more that um, players are vulnerable. They are they are. I, it's difficult for people to grasp when they hear that somebody is earning upwards of 200, 300,000 a week. Their first reaction will be, well, they can't have any problems. And I get why they say that, but that's not what mental health is about. It's having that ability to speak, to be able to speak, to share, to tell somebody you've got a problem. And I didn't speak for 42 years. Now I do nothing that speak but speak. And as you quite rightly said, for me, that has been the journey to my recovery as well. Repeating the story of what happened to me as a child, being able to repeat it without fear of retribution, or fear of criticism, fear of being ashamed. And I think we need to look at um, more of this with footballers of today, because I think when I look at children in particular, they start at clubs now at 6, 8 years of age. They have this dream of becoming a professional footballer all their lives, and then they've got the added pressure now with parents, because parents realise that
As a
if their
business,
child yeah, if their child makes it, everybody is made for life, so that's more pressure on. What we don't seem to grasp is that when they get to 18 and it's time for them to be told that 99% of them are being told that they're not going to make it and they're not wanted. And then we have so many children, and I call them children because they are up to 18, being left to go into society without the tools to be able to handle it, and they get themselves in situations where they wouldn't ordinarily, because they're lost. They get into crime, they get into drugs, they go to jail. You know, in the worst case, they take their own lives. So I think I have a moral responsibility, because If I save one child from going through anything like that, then uh, I feel like I've done my job. Um, but I think we have a lot of work still to do on the football side, not just with the children, but with those that are playing at the highest level, and we need to make sure that we're looking after them and that they have the care that they need.
And to be fair, I mean, obviously that speaks music to my ears because we speak about it, but I think you don't speak about it often. If you could put it this way, if you could design a better transition system for players leaving football, what would it include? Tough one, innit?
Yeah, it's a tough one because each player's an individual, as you know. Seb, you've been in the changing room with 14, 15 lads, and their needs are so much more different. What I would do, I would use ex players more that have had experiences, that have had and been through experiences and come through experiences, and and probably train them to become the almost like the social workers. I know we have player caring clubs now, but I'm not so sure, and I don't know whether you agree. You might not, but I always think a player can relate to another player because they know that we know what it's like to achieve that standard, and therefore you're able to talk on the same level. And I always say, Seb, it's really about talking, and I would have somebody within the club like that at least once a week, that they're able to pull different players, chat to them, ask them if they're okay, because they still players still I feel they're in that mold where they don't want to feel that they're weak if they ask for help, if they that you need to be this macho image. And I always say to the young children, you know what, you're not weak, you're strong, because if you identify that you've got an issue and you ask for help, I
That's
think that makes you a strong individual.
Listen, that's vulnerability. And for me, asking for help is a way. That's how I define it. When you ask for
Mm,
help, you are acting up towards the fact that you want to stay at the top. I don't want to drop, so I'm asking you to help me to stay at
yeah,
the top. For me, that comes from a position of strength and
yeah,
vulnerability, weakness. Too. Yeah, I totally agree. People might think, but being vulnerable shows so much strength and power because that you can show people that as me being open and talking, I can still perform. It's not
yeah,
because I say that I'm struggling that I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think the narrative and my question was just for to show people that if we do specialize players, because behind the player, before being a football player, we're a man,
yeah,
we're men, and there's some specificity that we have as a person, the way we're naturally wired, and there's player care. But I think players, throughout their own experiences, they can really be tailor-made. Some people have had gambling problems throughout their career. That's, I think, the area where they can really have an impact because they've been through it. There's, their story is relevant the same way the way you're doing things. Is that does that make sense?
yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, and like you say, that's why I say to you, we need, it it's okay having an ex-player that really has sailed through his career with 500 appearances without any issues, and not that there's many of those about, by the way. I'm not being
I
flippant, but I think those that have struggled and have learned from the struggles. I've come through it, Seb. There's no. I'm not saying to bring people in that still having struggles because I don't think that's good for the individual. Is it not? Is it good for the player? But if we can get some sort of group of ex players that can share their experiences. Whether you've been through a gambling experience or the abuse experience, there's still a narrative there, Seb, that you've struggled. Somewhere you have struggled, whether that be in your personal life, with mental health issues, in your relationships, you still had them struggles. And I know Tony Adams set up that centre for players that have had drug problems, but I don't know whether 4 weeks at a sort of a retreat is enough. I think players need somebody on the ground all the time with that experience and be able to identify, because I've been doing this, it'll be 10 years next year, and I get a lot of people that come up to me with problems, whether that's, you know, from abuse or mental health problems. But I think you get to a stage where you can tell if somebody's struggling, if you've been through it yourself, without trying to say that you know everything, but there's just something that
It's
tells you,
yeah,
and then you can go, if you're installed into a club, you can go and pull individuals and sit and talk to them. I think I think a lot of clubs are missing a trick on that, because certainly in the Premiership, we know that the clubs can afford to employ somebody of that nature. I don't believe in somebody coming in twice a week, being able to do that, because I think as players, you want to build a relationship. You want to build that trust before you'll open up to anyone. So, certainly, I know that when you go down the leagues, it's much more difficult because of the funds that are available at certain clubs. But even the Premier League themselves, I think they could afford to put more of that TV money into the mental health of the players that are coming in and out of the game. And they're vast numbers, Seb, and I think morally, I think the game's immoral. If I'm honest, they're saying something that somebody might say, "What you talking about?" Well, the way that we would take children in and keep them up to a certain age, they've got dreams and they think they're going to be a footballer, then we'll drop them like a ton of bricks without caring what might happen uh, a few years down the line, because they've had this dream and they've not known anything else, and it's been drummed into them. I think the game is immoral because it takes players and does that. Takes We're talking about taking human beings here and not really caring so much about the human, just as a
it's a
football, their own
product
gains.
as a
And I think the game's immoral for that reason. And I guess why I continue to be that lone ranger, if you will, is because I don't want people or organisations or NGBs to think that they can quieten me if I've got something that I feel isn't right. And if I'm honest, and this is the first time I've said it publicly, I think the game's immoral.
last question for you, Paul, and then I'll let you go. What does success means to you now?
Success. I always say this, Seb. I have in my home a FA Cup winners medal, two Championship winners medal, two Community Shield trophies, a Golden Boot for 30 goals at Manchester City, England caps from every level. None of them are on show in my house because all they represent is heartache and pain. What what is success to me? I've been made a doctor from Salford University for the work that I do within safeguarding. I got the Contribution to Football League award from the EFO, which is the highest award that they give out to an individual for my work in safeguarding. And on the 13th of September, I'm going to Wembley, being invited to the Serbia game to receive the Sir Bobby Charlton Award, um, which is again for the work that I do in safeguarding. So for me, safeguarding children is success.
Thank you very much, Paul. You know what? That says it all. I can't speak after that. Because for me, that's the growl, that's the top, that's top notch. Thank you very much for being so honest, so open. That's why conversation like that reminds us, and I want those conversations to remind people that behind football players, we're human first, we're people first, with story that will inspire people. And for me, that's the best thing. Thank you very much. That was the Players Lounge on Football Business TV, where the game gets down to business. In the meantime, take care of yourself, speak, and love you all. Bye bye.